Okay, good evening. Thank you so much, Nandini, for organizing this event and for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Mahka Moeen. I'm an assistant professor of strategy at the UNC's Kenan-Flagler Business School and also a research fellow at the Kenan Institute. I've been studying agricultural biotechnology, the entrepreneurial firms within it, the industry in general. So I'm very thrilled to be here today and meet all of you in person, as you guys have been the numbers and firms in my samples. And I really view this presentation as just a starting point for having a long-term two-way conversation moving forward. So I thought that instead of starting with the agricultural biotechnology industry, it may be worthwhile to take a step back and just look at how industries evolve in general, because this is one of the topics that in strategy and entrepreneurship we care a lot about. So over the past half a century, we have documented evolution of 50 and 60 other industries in parallel to ag biotech, and we have identified several trends and coevolutionary patterns that industries often experience. And agricultural biotechnology is no exception, as we'll talk about the details in a few minutes. So the first industry trend that I would like to talk about is the trends of industry sales, the dollar value that customers are willing to pay for products that a new industry offers. The way that these industry sales typically look like is that after the first product is often commercialized in a market, there is a little time period where consumers are really worried about buying a product. They're not sure what that novel technology or product has to offer, and they're hesitant. So we'll see only a small number of customers interested in a product. After a while, we'll go into a growth stage. That's the time that everybody becomes excited about the product. We'll see an accelerated rate of new product and technology adoption. And this is a time period that may take only a few days, in the case of industries such as Pokemon Go that you might have seen, or more substantive industries, on average 15 years. And on the other end of the spectrum, like industries like eye contact lenses took 40 years to experience this time period. So there is a huge variety there. After experiencing this growth stage, industries often reach a peak, there is maturity, and all the customers that could have been interested in that product have already bought it. Or the technology that underlies that new product may become obsolete, and then we'll observe a decline. Now, looking at these trends and comparing it to industry sales within the agricultural biotechnology context, just focusing on, let's say, transgenic crop market, which is like a big dimension, big segment of the whole industry. Well, the first products were commercialized around 1995, the transgenic soybeans and cottons that were introduced. Well, maybe the first few months, people were nervous about adopting these products, but over the next 4 years, before 2000, the percentage of cultivated land in U.S. that were planted that used these transgenic seeds reached 95%. This is a huge growth if you now put these numbers in perspective. As I told you that the average growth stage takes around 15 years. In ag biotech, we covered that time period in 4 years. So this is a very good sign, because moving forward after those initial product commercialization, new crop varieties, new traits that were introduced experienced the same accelerated rate of technology adoption. So this is a really promising sign for the whole sector. The second trend that I would like to talk about is the declining trend in prices. So with the passage of time, as industries move forward, there is typically a decline in price. This could be like a real decline in prices or an increase in value offering, but sort of similar pricing strategies. Again, in ag biotech, even though prices might not have changed dramatically, we see more novel technologies being offered. We see stacked traits, we see new crop varieties. And what all of these indicate is that we are seeing new value added, even though there is not like real-time decline in prices. So far everything that we see pretty much is consistent with the patterns that we have observed in many, many other industries over years. But some interesting things happen when we think about the number of firms. And entry and exit patterns in any industry is very key because we are able to observe that what is the entrepreneurial dynamism in each industry if there are lots and lots of entry. And the nature of exits in an industry also tells us a lot about what's going on, whether those exits are bankruptcies or exits that actually accompany high value capture. And I'll talk about those in more like great detail. So what do we have in terms of number of firms? Again, after introduction of the first product in any market, industries are typically populated with a handful of sole innovators who have to shape the industry, who have to fight customers, fight all the forces that may be out there that don't believe this industry may be a real thing. But after a while, we again see a growth stage during which many, many firms get excited about entering an industry, and there are lots of product offerings during that growth stage. This growth stage may be the result of the higher legitimacy that an industry receives. It could be the result of some regulatory uncertainties that are resolved. Because think about it, in early days, when industries are in their early days, like people don't know how to navigate regulatory process. It's not clear how IP litigation will eventually turn out. But many of those uncertainties will be resolved over time. The other thing about this growth stage is that it's often associated with many technological advancements. And with each step in these technological advancements, with each new opportunities, new firms will come in to study that. But eventually, similar to other trends, we'll reach a peak, and after which we'll see a rapid decline in the number of firms who are active in an industry. That's the period that we often refer to as the shakeout period in industries, and almost every industry that you look at will experience the shakeout period. It could be in the form of bankruptcies, firms exiting an industry altogether, or could be acquisition consolidation related shakeout. We'll see a decline in the number of firms without those firms entirely disappearing. And I would like to spend more time talking about this shakeout period, because if you look at today's agricultural biotechnology landscape, it may seem that this sector is undergoing a shakeout period, and it's worth investigating what are the characteristics of that industry shakeout, what are firm strategies, what happens to entrepreneurial startups in that period. But more importantly, questioning whether ag biotech is experiencing a shakeout, or is this just a temporary decline in the number of firms that will recover pretty fast. And for the interest of the community in ag biotech and North Carolina, hopefully finding a path so that we can shift the trajectory of this industry toward recovery rather than an entire shakeout. So, when we think about this theoretically, a couple of reasons drive an industry's shakeout. One of the reasons is that the technology matures to the extent that no firm and no entrepreneur is able to identify an opportunity to invest in, or the technology and the products associated with it mature to the extent that no customer is interested in a product. Think about a phonograph. No entrepreneur is going to invest in a phonograph firm because no customer wants to buy it. But now, if we put these trends aside with the initial trends that I showed you, farmers, customers, buyers downstream in agriculture industry are very much interested in the products that the community can offer. So we don't see any of those reasons. If we look at the number of patenting that's happening within the context of universities, this area is thriving. There are many, many scientific publications published in journals out there. So we don't really see any of these happening in the ag biotech sector. And that's a very, very promising signal. The other reason that typically drives shakeout is that firms may need to pursue economies of scale. And what do I mean by this? So in many industries, typically in production-based industries such as car manufacturing, you cannot have factories smaller than a certain size because you have to sort of spread the costs of production across the number of units that are being produced. In agricultural biotechnology, we don't have such a thing. Firms are given the downstream capabilities that firms have already developed in the market, it is very hard to imagine that they suddenly want to move from small scale to large scale downstream. And if we want to generalize this to the technology and R&D experiments that they are conducting, R&D is something that doesn't necessarily benefit from economies of scale. It indeed benefits from very much specialization and spreading over a number of scientists that work in parallel, some sort of races toward development of new technologies. So pretty much all of the explanations that the strategic management theory can offer for a shakeout period are not explaining what's going on in the ag biotech sector. And I would like to add something else from my own research to this conversation in that if we step back and not just count major players such as Monsanto, Bayer, and Syngenta as the core firms in an industry, which is the way that typically people outside of an area or academics will look at it, we'll see that this area is actually pretty diverse. And I would like to highlight a few points. First of all, when we look at this industry, this is not an industry that was developed in 1995 because that's when customers suddenly saw the product. The industry indeed started way earlier at least as early as 1977 with the major scientific discoveries that happened. And throughout this time, the dark blue charts here show the number of firms that had a commercialized product on the market. We have the Carolina blue bars that actually show the number of firms that were involved in some sort of R&D experiment in this industry. And even though we are seeing a decline in the number of those product commercializers, those downstream firms, there is no decline in the number of firms that are involved in R&D experiments, that those entrepreneurial startups that are investing in the industry. And this is a very, very important fact to note because those startups, and we'll hear more from Nick today about his experiences in Athenix, those are the firms that really develop technologies that are later integrated into the business plan and downstream operations of other major players. So we may not see their products on the market, but without them, the industry ecosystem might not have thrived. And the conclusion that I would like to take here is that if we would like to really evaluate the structure of the agricultural biotechnology in the industry as a whole, the fact that we see a decline in the number of major firms as a result of acquisition-related consolidation does not necessarily mean that this industry is moving toward a shakeout. Indeed, this thriving and vibrant entrepreneurial activity that's accompanying opens up many, many opportunities. And let me add to this a fourth trend that industries often experience. There is also a shift in knowledge sources of innovation in industries. When industries are first introduced and emerge, many of the founders of entrepreneurial startups are academic scientists. These are the people, the pioneers who have developed the first generation of the technology. And if they don't take action, if they don't take what they've developed in their labs and create a proof of concept and establish the viability of those findings for the general industry, nobody is going to take that seriously. So that first generation often involves scientists and academic entrepreneurs. However, as we move over time, with the passage of time, this shifts toward having more and more employee entrepreneurs. People who have worked for major firms within the industry have observed opportunities that exist, but feel like they cannot appropriate that opportunity completely if they stay within their existing firms. So what they do is that they move out of their existing businesses in the form of employee entrepreneurs. They may collaborate with universities or, again, reach out to the expertise of those scientists in universities, but they are the managers. They are the ones who are involved in day-to-day activities of the firms. And if we look at many other industries, like really the origin of some key industries in US go back to employee entrepreneurs. A very interesting example of it is semiconductors in Silicon Valley. If you look back at the history of every startup firm in Silicon Valley, with 3 degrees of separation, they come from a company that existed in 1980s named Fairchild. So we can look at Silicon Valley and call them fair children as a result of this. And no, that's an academic term. That's what we use. And the beauty of employee entrepreneurs is that they know exactly what's going on in an industry. They have worked there. They come in equipped with the necessary knowledge and expertise, and this makes them very different from a general entrepreneur that you may see as working out of a garage, even though we may see more of those entrepreneurs in our Hollywood movies. So what do I want to take away from today's talk? I listed at least 3 major patterns over the course of industry evolution, and all 3 of them hold for ag biotech, at least till 2016, the last time that I checked the industry data. The first one is that customers are very interested in buying products that we're offering. That's good news. The second one is that the industry seems to be at a juncture where we are not sure whether this is a full shakeout, whether we're going for a full rapid decline in the number of firms, or this is a minor trend that may recover pretty fast. And the data that I have pretty much supports the latter story, in that we will be recovering from that decline. And the reason we will be recovering is this third trend about the shift in knowledge sources that I highlighted. Because as these firms experience acquisitions, they will release unused resources to the environment. And those resources, typically in many, many industries, are employees, are former employees that very well know the landscape and are able to take opportunities out and create employee startups. Indeed, if we look back to 1995, when Monsanto acquired Calgene, the origin of many startups in that time period came from Calgene employees. So this is a trend that has repeated itself over time, just in the ag biotech industry, but trust me, in other industries as well. And the missing link here is that if we have all the resources in the environment, if this is something that's happening everywhere, what is the best way to actually benefit from this environment? My hope is that our talk today would inspire entrepreneurial activities forward, but those entrepreneurial activities may not work by themselves. It may require support from many institutional actors, such as North Carolina Biotechnology Center, other private and public collaborations, and a trusted investment in the area that I hope this talk would have been able to provide. Thank you.